The Colonial Parkway is the kind of place you'd drive on a perfect fall afternoon. 23 miles of winding road in Virginia, stretching from Jamestown to Yorktown. It's not a highway in the modern sense, no neon gas stations, no street lights, just dense trees, and the occasional overlook where you could pull off and stare at the James River, and silence. In the daytime, it's beautiful. In the fall, it's picture perfect. Red leaves, golden sun, and water sparkling like glass. But at night, it's pitch black. There are no lights, no steady flow of cars, nothing but shadows and the sound of your own tires. For decades, couples came here to escape, to talk, and to fall in love. It was a lover's lane, safe, quiet, and private, until 1986, when the Parkway's reputation changed forever. Because that year, 2 women vanished, and 3 days later, their car was found at one of those overlooks. And what police found inside would change everything. Because whoever killed them didn't just commit murder, they staged a scene, and that scene still raises more questions than answers. October 9th, 1986. Kathy Thomas, 27 years old, a former naval officer, independent, ambitious, not the type to scare easily. Her girlfriend, Rebecca Dowski, 21, a senior at William & Mary. Bright, warm, the kind of person friends described as full of light. That night, they were last seen leaving campus in Kathy's white Honda Civic. Just 2 young women out together. Nothing unusual, nothing that suggested they were in danger. But when neither of them showed up over the next few days, friends grew worried. Calls went unanswered, and classes were missed. It wasn't like Rebecca, and Kathy was disciplined from her time in the Navy. She didn't just disappear. On October 12th, 3 days later, a jogger running along the Colonial Parkway noticed something strange. A white Honda Civic parked awkwardly near an overlook by Cheatham Annex. When police arrived and looked inside, they froze. Kathy and Rebecca were still in the car. Their wrists bore ligature marks. They'd been tied. Both women had been strangled. Their throats slashed so deeply it was almost a decapitation. Someone had poured diesel fuel all over the bodies and across the seats, trying to burn the car, but the fire never caught. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. No robbery, no sign of forced entry, purse is still inside. Everything about it suggested that Kathy and Rebecca had let their killer in, or been forced by someone they trusted. And here's the part investigators couldn't shake: the staging. The car wasn't hidden, it was left out in the open as if someone wanted it to be found. Imagine standing there, looking at that car. It's a crisp October morning. The leaves are falling, the river glints behind you, and in front of you is the kind of violence that makes no sense. It wasn't just murder, it was a message. But a message from who? At first, theories flew. Was it a hate crime? Kathy and Rebecca were a same-sex couple, and in 1986, that could make them targets. Was it random, or had someone used the quiet darkness of the Parkway to hunt? One possibility chilled investigators most of all: impersonation. The car doors, belongings, and positioning. It looked as if Kathy and Rebecca had complied, maybe thinking they were dealing with law enforcement. But if that was true, then whoever was responsible didn't just kill, they used authority to lure their victims in. And if that's the case, then it wasn't just 2 lives lost. It meant anyone driving the Parkway could be at risk, because the killer had figured out how to make strangers trust them. The next year, almost to the day, another couple turned up dead. September 1987, David Nobling, 20 years old, worked in construction. Robin Edwards, just 14, a high school freshman. 2 very different lives brought together for what should have been a simple night out. Their bodies were discovered near the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge, about 30 miles from the Colonial Parkway. At first glance, maybe unrelated, but investigators immediately noticed similarities. The car was found abandoned, valuables left inside, no sign of robbery, and the bodies positioned in a way that suggested staging. But this time, the cause of death wasn't strangulation or slashing. Both David and Robin had been shot. To investigators, this was terrifying. 1 year earlier, Kathy and Rebecca had been tied up, strangled, and nearly decapitated. Now, a completely different method, gunshots, same type of scene, same eeriness, but a new weapon. Which raises the question, was this the same killer changing tactics? Or were there multiple predators working the same region at the same time? Friends and family were devastated. Robin was just 14, a kid. She'd snuck out that night, telling no one where she was going. And when her body was found on the riverbank, her youth was what shocked the community most. This wasn't just an attack on couples anymore. It was an attack on innocence itself. For the families, the question wasn't abstract, it was urgent. Was there a serial killer preying on lovers along quiet stretches of the road? Or was this something even worse? A hunter who didn't care who the victims were, as long as they were vulnerable. Different weapon, same terror. So, was this the same person? Or was Virginia dealing with more than one killer? Just months later, April 1988, another young couple disappeared. Cassandra Haley and Keith Call. Cassandra was 18, a William and Mary student. Keith was 20, studying at Christopher Newport. That night, they went to a party. Friends said they were laughing, enjoying themselves, and nothing out of the ordinary. But sometime after leaving the party, they vanished. Keith's car was found the next morning along the Colonial Parkway. The scene was eerie. Keys still in the ignition, doors unlocked. Inside, Cassandra's glasses, Keith's watch, items carefully placed, as if to suggest they'd been preparing to show ID or comply with an officer. But there were no footprints and no struggle, and most importantly, no bodies. To this day, Cassandra and Keith have never been found. Investigators were chilled. Whoever staged that scene knew exactly what they were doing, and this time, without bodies, the questions multiplied. Was the killer perfecting his craft, leaving fewer traces, or was this a copycat imitating the earlier murders? Families pleaded for answers, search parties combed the parkway, the woods, and the rivers. Nothing. It was as if the couple have evaporated into the night. And this detail haunted investigators. The items inside the car, the glasses, the watch, carefully left, almost like props in a play. Who leaves their glasses behind unless they expect to come right back? Who takes off a watch before vanishing? Too many. It felt staged. Not just murder, but theater. A performance designed to taunt the living. Keys in the ignition, glasses on the dash, no bodies, which means one of two things. Either the killer learned how to erase every trace, or Cassandra and Keith were never meant to be found. By the late 1980s, the Colonial Parkway murders had become front-page news in Virginia. Parents warned kids to never drive that road at night. Couples avoided the pull-offs. Rumors spread faster than facts, and investigators were desperate. They chased every possible lead. Some believe the killer might have been law enforcement, or someone pretending to be. Why? Because the cars didn't look like they'd been broken into. Keys still in ignitions, belongings left as if victims had been preparing for a routine stop. It was as if someone had shown a badge, real or fake. Others pointed to locals, fishermen, people who knew the woods and rivers intimately. The staging of vehicles near waterways suggested familiarity with the terrain. There were suspects. One was a man named Ron Little, who ran a private security company. He was linked to at least one of the victims socially, and there were whispers of him flashing fake credentials. But when pressed, nothing stuck. He even passed a polygraph test. Then there was the question of multiple killers, different methods, knives, ropes, guns. Didn't feel like one person's pattern. Some investigators thought the Colonial Parkway wasn't the hunting ground of a single predator, but a perfect stage for more than one. But there was a problem. The FBI and local police weren't always sharing information. Cases got siloed, leads fizzled. Evidence, by today's standards, wasn't handled with the same care, and with no arrests, the Colonial Parkway became less a road and more a ghost. Families waited, theories multiplied, but the truth seemed to slip further away with each year. And that's when investigators tried a tool that felt like science fiction back then. But decades later, it would change everything. DNA. For years, the case went cold. The Colonial Parkway murders slipped into the category of unsolved legend, whispered about, feared, but never resolved, until 2024. Nearly 4 decades after Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were found in that Honda Civic, the FBI finally got a name. DNA recovered from evidence had been compared using advanced genealogy techniques, the same kind that caught the Golden State Killer. The name was Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. Wilmer was a local fisherman, known around the waterways of Virginia. He wasn't a drifter, he wasn't a stranger to the area. In fact, investigators now believe he lived right among the communities terrorized by the killings. But there was a catch. Wilmer had died in 2017. He was never interrogated, never put on trial. His DNA linked him to the 1987 murders of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, and to another case, the 1989 killing of Teresa Lynn Howell. but not all of the Parkway murders, which left investigators and families with a new nightmare. Was Wilmer the Colonial Parkway killer, or just one of them? To some families, the DNA felt like vindication. Finally, a name, a face, proof their loved ones hadn't been forgotten. But to others, it opened more questions than answers. If Wilmer killed some of the victims, who killed the rest? The FBI admitted that locals had suspected for decades the Colonial Parkway murders may not have been the work of a single hand. Different methods, different victims, different years. The DNA only tied Wilmer to some, which means after 40 years, there's a name, but not yet a resolution. And the scariest thought is this. What if Wilmer wasn't the mastermind, but just one of many predators who discovered the Parkway was the perfect hunting ground? A fisherman, a dead man, tied to only some of the cases. So if Alan Wilmer Sr. wasn't the Parkway killer in full, who else was out there? The DNA breakthrough in 2024 gave families something they hadn't had in almost 40 years. A name. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. But it didn't explain everything. In fact, it left huge gaps. Take Cassandra Haley and Keith Call. April 1988. Their car abandoned on the Parkway. Glasses on the dash. Keys in the ignition. No struggle and no bodies. To this day, neither has ever been found. The FBI admits Wilmer isn't tied to this case, which means one of two things. Either he was involved but left no DNA, or he had nothing to do with it. Then there's Anna Maria Phelps and Daniel Lauer, September 1989. Their car abandoned at a rest stop, as if they pulled over for a break. Months later, hunters stumbled on their skeletal remains in the woods nearby. Cause of death? Undetermined. Their bones were too far gone. Again, Wilmer wasn't linked. This is where the Colonial Parkway murders fracture into something scarier than a single serial killer. If Wilmer didn't do them all, then who else was hunting? Were these murders even connected? Or had the Parkway, once word spread of its infamy, become a stage for other predators to strike and hide their work? For families, the uncertainty is cruel. Some know Wilmer's DNA ties them to their children's deaths. Others are left in limbo, still waiting for the missing to come home or for proof someone else is guilty. And for investigators, it raises the worst kind of question. What if there was never a single Colonial Parkway killer? What if it was a legend created by multiple killers striking in the same haunting stretch of road? Because if Wilmer wasn't responsible for every case, then someone else is still out there, their identity hidden in the dark silence of the Parkway. Different victims, different methods, some strangled, some shot, some vanished entirely. For decades, investigators tried to force the pieces into one puzzle, one killer, one pattern, but the DNA evidence changed that narrative forever. If Alan Wilmer Sr. was guilty of some, but not all, of the Colonial Parkway murders, then at least one other predator was active in Virginia during that time. Maybe more than one. Think about it. Kathy and Rebecca, 1986. Throats slashed, nearly decapitated. David and Robin, 1987. Shot and left by the river. Cassandra and Keith, 1988, vanished and never found. Anna Maria and Daniel, 1989, skeletal remains with no cause of death. 4 years, 4 cases, 8 young lives, each just different enough to raise doubts. Could Wilmer have changed methods so dramatically? Maybe. Serial killers evolve, they experiment, but the gaps are hard to ignore. One theory is chilling. The Colonial Parkway wasn't the hunting ground of a single monster. It was a perfect trap, isolated, dark, and unpatrolled. And more than one predator discovered it. That's why the cases don't align neatly. Different hands, same stage. For families, that theory is unbearable. It means the truth may never be fully known. Some killers dead, others never identified. Some victims linked, others lost to the shadows. And that's why, nearly 40 years later, the Colonial Parkway murders remain one of the most disturbing cold cases in America. Because even with a name, even with DNA, the bigger picture is still fractured, which leaves us with the question no one wants to face. What if the Colonial Parkway will never have one answer, because it was never just one killer? If that's true, then every clue we thought pointed to one predator might actually point to several. And that means this case isn't just unsolved, it may be unsolvable. Today, the Colonial Parkway looks the same as it did in the 1980s. Trees arc over the asphalt, the river glitters in the sun, and tourists drive slowly through. stopping at the overlooks to snap photos. To a stranger, it's just another scenic drive. Peaceful, beautiful, and ordinary. But to the families of Kathy and Rebecca, David and Robin, Cassandra and Keith, Anna Maria and Daniel, and Teresa Lynn Howell, it's a graveyard without headstones. A place where silence hides screams. A road that still holds secrets. The FBI insists the cases remain open. DNA work is ongoing, but 4 decades later, the answers feel more fractured than ever. One name has been given, but many questions remain. And so, the Parkway remains what it became in 1986, a place of shadows, a stretch of road where the beauty of Virginia hides something darker, where headlights pierce the night, and families wonder if the killer is still out there. The Colonial Parkway murders remind us of something we don't like to face. Not every case ends neatly. Not every mystery is solved. Sometimes justice comes in pieces, and sometimes it never comes at all. This is the Colonial Parkway, and its silence is the loudest of all, because the road still winds on, and with it, the questions that may never be answered. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you want to become a Veil Walker.